The year was 2015, and somewhere in the vast landscapes of America, a young woman carried the weight of a past too dark for her age. This is the story of Ashlee Yan, a girl whose life was marked by pain, betrayal, and unimaginable horrors. Ashlee Yan was born on March 6, 1998. The details of her birthplace remain unknown, but one thing is certain: her life was never easy. Her mother, Jennifer, was only 23 when she became pregnant, and any hopes of a happy family were quickly shattered. Ashlee's father, a man lost in obscurity, was a violent figure. His aggression tore their family apart, leaving Jennifer to raise her daughter alone. By 2007, Ashlee was just 9 years old when her mother entered a new relationship, one that would plunge their lives into a nightmare. This man, whose name remains undisclosed, was cruel beyond words. He would throw objects at Ashlee, extinguish cigarettes on her skin, and subject her to even greater horrors behind closed doors. Ashlee later revealed in an interview, her voice trembling, that this man took everything from her. But it wasn't just her suffering. Her mother endured his abuse as well, verbal, physical, and relentless. Yet, despite knowing what was happening to her daughter, Jennifer did nothing. Even worse, she allowed this man into Ashlee's room at night under the pretense of tucking her in. But what he did was something far more sinister. This torment lasted 2 long years, until, finally, Jennifer left him. But Ashlee's relief was short-lived. Her mother had fallen for another man, Thomas. He came with 3 daughters from a previous relationship, and together, they formed a family of 6 in rural Wisconsin. But this was no home. This was a house of horrors. Thomas had a criminal past riddled with violence, assault, and unspeakable acts. Police reports detail disturbing allegations, including an incident where he and his ex-wife groomed a 13-year-old boy, exposing him to things no child should ever witness. Though some of his family insisted he had changed, the truth was far darker. Ashlee and her stepsisters bore witness to his brutality firsthand. Thomas ruled his home with an iron fist, controlling everyone through fear. He killed baby animals in front of them. He once strangled the family dog, threw it against the wall, shot it, and fed it to a bear, just to make a statement. His violent rage extended to everyone in the household. If Jennifer spoke out of turn, he would beat her without hesitation. His own daughters weren't spared either. One of Ashlee's younger sisters was once strangled so tightly that her skin began turning blue. For Ashlee, art became an escape. She immersed herself in a world of darkness, channeling her trauma into an online persona, Vampchick. She built a website filled with chilling poetry, macabre short stories, and eerie drawings. Her posts spoke of madness, of blood, of guilt, of pain. In one of her poems, she wrote, "They say one of us is to blame. You're holding that knife covered in blood. I'm laughing off the pain, wondering which one of us is guilty, if we're both totally insane." To the outside world, Ashlee appeared like any other teenager. A little shy, a little different. But inside, she was a girl haunted by the past, trapped in a home of nightmares, searching for a way to escape. And soon, that darkness would manifest in ways no one could have imagined. Darkness had always followed Ashlee Yan, but on the night of March 7, 2015, it finally consumed her. For years, Ashlee had suffered in silence. School was her only escape, but even that wasn't enough. Every day, she lived in fear that one day, Thomas would go too far. That her mother, Jennifer, wouldn't survive his wrath, and if that happened, Ashlee didn't want to be there to witness it. By early 2015, she had a plan. She was going to run away. She wasn't going to do it alone either. The boyfriend, Ryan Daniel Sisko, was ready to leave with her. Ryan was 22, and their relationship was already a source of tension. Ashlee knew that if Thomas ever found out about them, there would be hell to pay. Her 17th birthday was supposed to be the beginning of her freedom. Instead, it was another nightmare. That morning, she was forced to listen to her mother screaming for her life as Thomas launched another violent attack. The sound of her mother's pain was unbearable. She grabbed her phone and messaged Ryan, pouring out her rage. She hated them. She hated Thomas. She hated her mother. She wanted him dead. In a fury, she described exactly how she would do it. She would take one of his illegally owned guns and blow his brains out. She didn't just want to escape, she wanted revenge. But revenge would come sooner than she expected. The next day, March 7, an argument erupted between Ashlee and Thomas. He had discovered her secret, her relationship with Ryan. His fury was uncontrollable. He demanded that Jennifer lock Ashlee away. No more school, no job, no freedom. She would be a prisoner in their home until she learned obedience. But Jennifer had other plans. "If you want to run away," she told Ashlee, "then go." That was it. No fight, no concern, just a dismissal. Ashlee packed her bags and started walking toward her friend Jonathan's house. But Thomas wasn't done with her yet. He followed her in his truck, catching up and forcing her inside. As they drove back home, he warned her. She was making a mistake. It was in her best interest to stay. Ashlee sat in the passenger seat, feeling like her world was collapsing. She had no control, no freedom, no way out. When they got back to the house, she made her way to her bedroom. But before stepping inside, she made a detour, one that would change everything. She grabbed one of Thomas's loaded shotguns. Sitting on her bed, she considered ending her own life. Maybe that was the only escape. But then, another thought entered her mind. Why should she die? Why not him? Heavy footsteps echoed through the house. Ashlee could hear Thomas coming, his voice booming with anger. He was making his way toward her room, pounding on the walls, slamming his fists against the door. Bang, bang, bang. And then, in one final blow, the door swung open. The shotgun was already raised. With one pull of the trigger, Ashlee fired. The blast tore into Thomas's neck, sending him stumbling backward into the hallway. Blood sprayed across the walls, pooling on the floor. He was still alive, barely. Ashlee followed him out. She stood over him, the shotgun still clutched in her hands. He looked up at her, eyes wide with shock. Without hesitation, she pressed the barrel against his temple. Another shot rang out. His body went limp. But it wasn't over. The gunshots had drawn Jennifer's attention. She came running, horror etched across her face. Ashlee looked at her mother, searching for comfort, for relief, for anything. But Jennifer didn't reach for Ashlee. She reached for Thomas. Even in death, she chose him. In that moment, something inside Ashlee snapped. Jennifer grabbed a hunting knife, turning on her daughter. The two struggled, fighting for control of the blade. The three younger girls in the house watched in terror as mother and daughter battled in a deadly embrace. But Ashlee was stronger. She ripped the knife from her mother's hands. And then, she let go of everything. Rage took over. She stabbed Jennifer. Once, twice, again. 35 times. With each blow, she poured out years of pain, betrayal, and anger. The knife sank deep into flesh, shattering bone, mutilating the woman who had let her suffer for so long. By the time she was done, Jennifer was unrecognizable. Ashlee dropped the knife, her mother's hair tangled around its blood-stained blade. Ashlee knew she had to leave. But before she did, she had to make sure her sisters were safe. She led them into one of the bedrooms, setting down bottles of fresh juice and food, enough to last for hours. They were too young to understand the full horror of what had just happened, but they knew something was terribly wrong. Ashlee gave them one last glance before stepping out. This was her only chance. She made her way to the bathroom, stripped off her blood-stained clothes, and stepped into the shower. The water washed over her, but it couldn't cleanse what had been done. When she emerged, she was no longer just a frightened teenager. She was a fugitive. Without looking back, Ashlee left the house and ran to her friend's home a mile down the road. She stayed only briefly before jumping into her boyfriend Ryan's pickup truck. Their destination? Tennessee. The plan was simple: disappear, find refuge with a distant relative, and never look back. But Ashlee had overlooked something. The food and juice she left behind wouldn't last long, and sooner or later, the sisters would uncover the full extent of what had happened. The morning of March 8, 2015, brought a silence that was more terrifying than any scream. One of the girls, overcome with fear, picked up the phone and dialed 911. But the moment the operator answered, panic took over, and she hung up. She tried again, same result. The sisters were terrified Ashlee was still in the house, listening. Despite the failed attempts, dispatchers knew something was wrong. Multiple dropped 911 calls from the same location weren't ignored. But in the rural area where they lived, tracking the calls took longer than usual. Hours passed, and fear grew. Then finally, the eldest sister gathered the courage to stay on the line. This time, she spoke. Her words were chilling. "My father and stepmother are dead. There's blood everywhere." The call set off a full-scale police response. The police arrived cautiously. They didn't know what, or who, was inside. What they did know was that there had been gunfire, and 3 children were still in the house. A team of armed officers rushed inside. What they found was beyond horrific. Blood covered the walls and floors. The bodies of Thomas and Jennifer lay lifeless, their injuries so severe that one officer later described the scene as pure rage turned into violence. In one of the bedrooms, the officers found the 3 young girls huddled together in fear. When questioned, they revealed the horrifying truth. Ashlee had done it. She had pulled the trigger. She had fought her own mother. And then she ran. It didn't take long for authorities to track Ashlee and Ryan down. Their journey ended in Indiana, where police quickly apprehended them both. They were taken to the station, where investigators were eager to hear the truth. But Ashlee had a different story to tell. In a shocking twist, she denied everything. She told police they had it all wrong. It wasn't her. It was her mother. According to Ashlee, she had run upstairs after hearing gunshots, only to find her mother standing over Thomas's body, a shotgun in her hands. Jennifer had blamed her, screaming in rage. Ashlee claimed she had no choice but to fight for her life. But her sisters told a different story. And the evidence? It was all against her. They found the texts Ashlee had sent to Ryan, the ones where she talked about wanting to blow Thomas's brains out. They found her escape plan, her intent. Piece by piece, her story unraveled. Under pressure, Ashlee finally broke. At first, she claimed she had grabbed the gun only to use it on herself. But investigators weren't convinced. They pushed harder, and eventually she crumbled. Ashlee was charged with 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide and 3 counts of false imprisonment for attempting to confine her sisters. As the case prepared to go to trial, she wrote a letter to the judge. In it, she defended her actions. She claimed that despite everything, the sisters were better off now. Because Thomas? He was finally dead. As Ashlee sat in court, her expression remained unreadable. To many, her words carried an eerie sense of confidence, perhaps even arrogance. In a letter to the judge, she claimed that despite everything, their sisters were better off now. It was a chilling sentiment, considering the horror she had left them to face. Ashlee was only 16 when she was arrested, but the severity of her crimes meant she would be tried as an adult. At her initial hearing, she pleaded not guilty to first-degree intentional murder, arguing that she had acted in the heat of the moment, driven by trauma, and lacked the mental clarity to premeditate the killings. Her defense leaned heavily on her troubled past, claiming she was a victim long before she became an offender. 2 psychiatric experts, one from the defense and one from the prosecution, were called to assess her state of mind. Both doctors diagnosed Ashlee with PTSD and major depressive disorder, stemming from years of relentless abuse. But despite acknowledging her trauma, both concluded that she was fully aware of her actions. She understood right from wrong, and that meant her plea of insanity would not hold up in court. The prosecution had initially sought a 40-year sentence for first-degree murder, but as the case unfolded, they offered Ashlee a plea deal: second-degree intentional murder. It was a chance to avoid a potentially harsher sentence. On March 11, 2016, Ashlee stood before the judge and accepted the deal. Then came sentencing day, June 10, 2016. The courtroom was filled with tension as victim impact statements were read. Thomas's eldest daughters painted a picture of their father as a kind, loving, and funny man, a stark contrast to the previous statements they had given to police, where they had spoken of his violent tendencies. The prosecution demanded a minimum of 20 years behind bars, arguing that the brutality of the crime, Ashlee's lack of remorse, and her ever-changing versions of the story made her a danger to society. But the defense pushed back. They painted Ashlee as a broken girl, a child failed by the very people meant to protect her. They highlighted her youth, her lack of a criminal record, and the horrific abuse she had endured. The defense even argued that her state of mind was so fractured that she was barely capable of making rational decisions. They asked for an 8-year sentence, hoping for a chance at rehabilitation rather than lifelong punishment. The judge weighed both sides carefully. Ashlee was young, and there was a chance for rehabilitation, but there was no denying the severity of her crimes. In the end, the court sentenced her to 23 years in prison, followed by 17 years of supervised release. Since being incarcerated, Ashlee has claimed that prison has given her a sense of safety and peace. She has completed her high school diploma, trying to rebuild a life behind bars. In a rare interview, she insisted that she was not a monster, that she never wanted the murders to happen. But then, in a cryptic blog post from January 2020, she wrote, "I'm not in prison because I'm a dumb criminal. I'm here because I had a bad day." For some, those words were deeply unsettling. A bad day, that's how she described it. Public opinion on Ashlee's case remains divided. Some believe she was a product of a broken home, a victim turned perpetrator. They argue that her upbringing shaped her fate, and that she was only doing what she thought was necessary to survive. But others see her as a cold-blooded killer, someone who chose murder instead of seeking help, someone who should never be allowed back into society. And so the question lingers. Was Ashlee a victim of her circumstances, or a dangerous murderer who deserved every year of her sentence? And more importantly, would you feel safe knowing she could one day walk free?